Hello everybody, Kane541204 here, or as I like to be known as, Harley D. Stacy, and I am back to do part 2 of the Player's Handbook. So, for those of you who have seen part 1, icon, like right up here, I went through the races and classes in the Player's Handbook. This video, we are going to be discussing the personality and backgrounds, equipment, customizing and customization options, the ability score, essentially the mechanic of it, adventuring, and combat, essentially discussing some of the mechanics in the book. So, first to start off with, the personalities, or more accurately, the backgrounds in the Player's Handbook. I actually like a good chunk of them. I use the Sage background a lot for a lot of my wizard characters. I use the soldier background for a lot of fighters. Charlatan is one of the better thief backgrounds to use. Like, there's just a lot of good backgrounds in the Player's Handbook. If you want to take a look at them, obviously, you can get the book. I'm not going to sit here and just read the book to you because, well, let's be honest, that'd be a pretty boring video. But the personalities in this player handbook are actually pretty substantial, especially for newcomers. It gives you a decent idea of what your character kind of wants to be. And to be perfectly honest, that's not a bad thing. Especially for new players, it gives them something to essentially to jump off of. For me, personally, the backgrounds are just ways to make your character better at stuff. You get more proficiencies, you get more skills, you get a lot more stuff out of it. Plus, it may have some kind of effect on the world you're in. Like the folk hero background essentially makes you a hero to a lot of towns, to a lot of villages, because your stories of being a hero has kind of traveled far and wide, so everybody kind of knows of you. And, the Sage background is essentially you're a scholar trying to, well, there's a scholar background for it, but as a Sage, you're kind of a wandering arcane master. Oh, my phone's going off. But essentially, you've become a master of your craft. Give me 1 second. I have to check that. Okay, I'm going to edit that bit out. But the basic premise for them is not terrible. Equipment, it gives you a list. It essentially gives you 3 blocks, or as I like to call them, tables. It gives you 3 tables full of equipment. The first table you'll meet is about that big, and it's got all your armors that you can get. Scale, chain, plate, leather. It'll give you all the stats that you need for that. For instance, leather is 12 plus your dex mod, which I will get to in a second. This is why in the first video I said that I would have preferred the ability modifiers be at the beginning of the book rather than being after character creation, personally. Then you have your second block, which is purely weapons. You get... I actually have this one tabbed out. Here it is. You actually get a big old table of just weapons. Like, you've got frickin' clubs, daggers, swords, crossbows, frickin' axes, battle hammers, fucking great swords, war hammers, bow guns, blowguns. You got nets, you've got sickles, you've got spears. The only thing they don't actually stat out for a weapon is like a scythe, which is a proper wheat farming scythe. And they don't stat anything out for that, Because essentially you could just take the sickle and just make it bigger. Then on the second page, you have your next big table of stuff. And this is 2 columns of just stuff that you can have in your equipment. Like, and the page next to it gives like a description of each item. Like ball bearings. As an action, you can spill these tiny metal balls from their pouch to cover a level square area that is 15 feet on a side. The creature moving across this covered area must succeed on a DC 10 dexterity saving throw or fall prone. A creature moving through this area at half speed doesn't need to make the save. That's just one item. It goes through every single item and their potential use. Ball bearings is one of the better ones. Ball bearings and caltrops are one of the better items to use. Specifically ball bearings, because what are you going to do when you step on 100,000 little freaking tiny balls? You're in a trip. You know? So the equipment-wise, it gives you a pretty decent idea of stuff to have access to. Like there are tools. There's a tool table for all your tools. It tells you, like, mason's tools, leatherworking, carpentry, calligrapher. If you watch freaking, I can't remember his name. Yeah, it's one of the better tables in this entire book. It's just the tools. You know, smith's tools, tinker's tools, weavers, woodcutters, cooking utensils. You know, these are all items that you can essentially learn to use. You have gaming sets like freaking dice, dragon chess, playing cards, you know. There's herbalism kits. There's instruments. You know, bagpipes, flutes, drums, bongos. You know, these are things that you can actually learn to use. And then they have an entire table with nothing but mounts. Mounts. You can get a camel. You can get a donkey or a mule. You can buy an elephant. Fuck, I want an elephant. I want an elephant. I want an elephant to carry me around and carry all my shit. You know? And looking at it, it's like, that's so cool. The fact that I can just flip through the player's handbook, pick something, and just go, I want it. You know? I gotta find out how to get it, but I want it. There's even a table in here. There's even a table for discerning how to trade wheat, grass, corn, freaking product, turning platinum into gold, gold into freaking gold pieces. Like, all that shit's really cool. Like, there's food and drink. You know, ale, lodgings. You know, fucking, what is it? Hold on. It tells you by the gallon or by the fucking mug with the ale. Like, it tells you how to do this. Like, wine. Again, a pitcher of wine or a bottle. You know? You also have stuff like services, like cabs. A coach cab. You can literally hire somebody to take you between towns. Really? That is cool. Okay, this is going to sound really weird, but I have never used this in my game because I didn't know it existed. Holy shit. I'm so glad I did these reviews. Because this is actually giving me something else to actually look at. There's freaking ship passage, road or gate tolls, a freaking messenger. You want to go hire a messenger. A fucking hireling. You want to hire a fighter. It costs 2 gold pieces a day, but goddammit, you have him. And there's 2 pages of nothing but trinkets that you would roll a freaking percentile and a D10 to decide whether or not you got something. That's fucking insane. It's so cool. So, to say that I like the equipment section of this book, I fucking love it. The equipment section of this area, of this book, far exceeds just about anything else in the book. Obviously, I would recommend picking this book up no matter what, because if you're going to play D&D, you need to have the Player's Handbook. You have to have this. This is the primary book. It's like the number one thing you should buy if you're going to get into D&D. Don't buy the dice, don't buy anything else. Buy the Player's Handbook. Now, into the next chapter, customization options. And this goes into telling you how to multi-class. So, multi-classing is actually pretty broken in 5th edition. Primarily because of the fact that if you multi-class anything into fighter, you're essentially a nuke. You're essentially a nuke. And if you think I'm joking, you're wrong. Because a fighter essentially action surge. Action surge makes it busted. It turns whatever class you're playing into essentially a freaking meat grinder. Because it's like, okay, I'm gonna be a paladin fighter. Isn't that a bit redundant? Oh no, it's not. Because I'm gonna go into combat, I'm gonna swing twice with my paladin shit, and it's like, oh, okay, I did like 60 points of damage this turn. Okay, action surge, do it again. That's the thing, is the redundancy of being able to say, okay, action surge, do it again. Like, just the fact that you can literally go, okay, action surge, doing it again. Just to do it. Yeah, no, action surge is freaking busted. The fact that it's like, okay, action surge, freaking do it again. Like, in my Thursday game, I built a freaking, I built a cannon in my Thursday game, and my DM told me, okay, it's going to take 2 actions to load it. And it's like, okay. My artificer has freaking action surge. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to, main action, load, action surge, do it again, bonus action, fire. I have yet to use the cannon. I have yet to use it, but I cannot wait till you actually do so. But, yeah. Then, we go into experience points, hit points and hit dice, proficiencies. You get, like I said, you get different abilities through proficiencies. If you multi-class into fighter, you get light armor, medium armor, sword, or simple shields, and all weapons. You're proficient with simple and martial, which means all weapons. And that's just the fighter. The only 2 classes that are not worth multi-classing into, like you need to take them to start, is the sorcerer and the wizard. My bad to the warlocks in the world. No, the sorcerer and the wizard are fucking awful to multi-class into. Do not multi-class into wizards or sorcerers unless you know exactly what you're trying to build. If you're going to start out, I would recommend starting out as a wizard, or starting out as your multi-class of choice, as your secondary, and then multi-class into wizard and level the wizard all the way. And the reason behind that is because, personally, if you're going to play a character who essentially has, magic, all your abilities are coming from your magic. Sorcerers with their meta magics, and then wizards with the fact that they get 2 spells every level up. I forgot to mention that in the freaking class video, but wizards get a 2nd level, or get 2 spells every level up. Wizards don't get a lot through level up, except for their spells, and that's because their spells can be busted. I am actually going to be making a part 3 to this video, going over every spell. And that's going to be me actually reading the freaking book to you. Chances are I'll look at a list, go, oh, okay, this is what it is. This is what I remember. But there's something that I know a lot of people who are watching this want me to talk about. And it is the next part of customization. Feats. Oh man, there's a lot. Now, you're probably wondering, what are feats? Well, every 4 levels, most of the classes, especially the melee fighters, paladins, fighters, monks, I believe rangers, I believe fighter actually gets it every other level. They get something called an ability score improvement, which allows them to pick one of two things. They either get to increase their ability scores, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, or they can pick a feat. With a fighter, almost every other level, you're going to be able to pick a feat. And some of these feats are actually kind of good. Like the alert feat. +5 to your initiative, which is your dex modifier. You can't be surprised while you are conscious. That means nobody can sneak on you. Nobody can sneak up on you. You essentially have blind sense. Nobody's going to get an attack of opportunity or a bonus, a surprise round. They're not going to get a surprise round on you. Other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being hidden from you. So essentially, if a sneaky rogue is hiding around the corner and fires his freaking crossbow at the guy with the alert feat, the guy with the alert feat knows he's there and gets hit with it, potentially. But it's not at advantage. So rogues cannot sneak on you. You know, most of these increase your armor class, which is decided based off of your equipment or abilities, like unarmed defense, which monks and barbarians get. The actor feat increases your charisma. And these are actually pretty good, but a good chunk of them are very situational. There are only 3 feats in this entire book that I would say any would-be player wants. Not needs, but wants. One is the Keen Mind feat. You have a mind that can track time, duration, and detail with uncanny precision. You gain the following benefits. You increase your intelligence to 1, or by 1. You always know which way is north, so I always know which direction is north. You always know the number of hours left before the next sunrise or sunset, so say you're stuck in hell where there is no sun, and you're like, oh, well, I know in our time period that the sun sets in about 20 hours. We still have daylight to burn. You can accurately recall anything you have seen or heard within the past month. That means for any dungeon master, you have to make sure that you remember word for word what you say. Because guaranteed they're going to ask, and they never write it down. Never ever do they write it down. And it's like, well, I say never ever, but I have a player who does. And then she forgets her notes. So, yeah, Keen Mind, real good. I'm skipping over the second one, because it's last. Sentinel. This is the second ability that anybody who takes a feat is debating on. And here's why. You have mastered techniques to take advantage of every drop-in in any enemy's guard, gaining the following benefits. When you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, the creature's speed becomes 0 for the rest of the turn. Creatures provoke opportunity attacks from you, even if they take the disengage action before leaving your reach. So, no matter what, they get an opportunity attack. When a creature within 5 feet of you makes an attack against a target other than you, you can use your reaction to make a melee attack against the attacking creature. So, a lot of that is going to sound like jarble, or just like garble to a lot of you. But those of you who've played Dungeons & Dragons know immediately, oh yeah, Sentinel, the one that stops the enemy from getting in the face of our wizard. Give a barbarian or a paladin Sentinel, guaranteed your enemy is not moving. He's not going anywhere. He gets into melee with them with Sentinel, and he stops. dead in his tracks. Now, I mentioned that I skipped over the third one, and here's why. This one, I don't normally allow at my table. And the reason behind that is because this is one of the feats that I personally give a player, and only one player gets it. The feat is called Lucky. You have inescapable luck that seems to kick in, at least at the right moment. You get 3 luck points. Whenever you make an attack roll, ability check, saving throw, you can spend 1 luck point to roll an additional d20. You can choose to spend one of your luck points after you roll the die, but before the outcome is determined. You choose which of the d20s is used for the attack, ability check, or saving throw. You can also spend 1 luck point when an attack roll is made against you. Roll a d20 and then choose whether the attack uses the attacker's roll or yours. If more than one creature spends a luck point to influence the outcome of a roll, the points cancel each other out. No additional dice are rolled. You gain your expended luck points when you finish a long rest. It's going to take a minute. A lot of that, again, probably sounds just like, what? Here's how to explain it the best. My finger. See this right here? It's a wooden board. Every time I touch it, I have a potential of getting a sliver. Every time I get a sliver from it, I can potentially say, oh, no, I didn't, in D&D. I can essentially go, roll, that's a 2, I'm going to re-roll, because of luck. I have an ability check. I need to make sure that I succeed this. Luck. Lucky is one of the best feats in the entire game. It is literally the best feat in the entire game, because you need... it's busted. It is so broken. The ability to simply say, no, I'm going to reroll again, has so much power behind it, because there are so many different things to it. The fact of the matter is you as a player, having the ability to just say, no, I didn't roll that, and re-roll something, makes it to where almost guaranteed your character can't fail. In your average D&D game, you are not going to run into one whole day and need 20 checks to succeed. You only need 1 to really succeed. 9 times out of 10, you go through your whole day in D&D before you take your long rest. You need 1 to 2 things to actually succeed. You need those things to actually work. So what do? You make sure that you use Lucky, at least in those situations, to make sure that you actually succeed them. And if you actually succeed it before Lucky triggers off, you can go, okay, I have 1 that I can essentially spend however I want. And this is how most people who use Lucky are in the mindset of. They're always in this mindset of, okay, here's how we go about it. And then for, like me, I don't usually use Lucky. If I'm a player, if I have Lucky, I only use it when I need it. I only use it when I roll 1s and 2s. And the reason behind that is because when it comes to my dice, 1s and 2s come up a lot when I'm a player, at least. And I would rather not deal with that. So my Artificer has Lucky. I was allowed to pick a feat, and I was allowed to pick any feat from the Player's Handbook. I picked Lucky. My Artificer, like I said, he built a cannon. He's built guns in a world that didn't have them. So, he's a lucky motherfucker, and he's smart. So, take that however you will. Yeah. The feats are really good. The feats in the Player's Handbook are super, super good. They're not very situational. There's a couple that require ability scores to be a certain number, which makes sense. But aside from that, there's not that many that require prerequisites. Like Lucky. Lucky doesn't require anything. Sentinel doesn't require anything. Keen Mind does not require anything. You know, like I said, the trinity of freaking feats. You don't really need anything to get them. You just get them. So, now we're going to get into ability scores, because this is the chapter that I am going to be talking about the most. So, ability scores are your stats. You roll them out, or you do point buy, or you do, what is it? Oh, God. Standard array. That's what I'm thinking of. I hardly ever use it. So, there are 3 ways to determine your stats. There's standard array, point buy, and rolling. I will get through each one right quick. Alright. You notice that the camera angle has changed, and that's because we are going to be talking about these. So, what are all those? Those are your ability scores. You have strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. These are your whole life. Strength is obviously how strong you are, how much you're able to lift. You know, if your strength is that of a 10, you have an average strength. If your strength is an 8, you have below average. If your strength is a 12, it's above average. Your max of your stat block of any of the numbers is 20. You can only have 20 in one stat. Standard array, normally, from what I can remember, is 16 in 1. You have 16, 2 14s, 2 12s, and an 8, I believe. I could be wrong on that. Let's look. Okay. 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. And you can put those points wherever you want. And normally what a player will do, like myself, we pick our race, we pick our class, and then we pick our stats, if you're doing standard array. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to have kind of an idea of what you're building before you start putting things in. You don't want to put an 8 in your strength if you're playing a barbarian. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. You do not want to put an 8 in your strength when you are a barbarian. So with these stats, I'll just arrange them into the standard array. We'll go with the barbarian example and just, you know, strength is your highest, wisdom and intelligence are your lowest. Pretty cut and dry, pretty simple. After all that's figured out, then you take your racial bonuses and you just add them in. Personally, I don't like standard array. I think standard array just makes every character the same. You're essentially building the same character over and over and over again with the same stats every time. Then you have point buy. Point buy is essentially you have 8s across the board. Your DM gives you a set number of points to spend, and then you just spend it. So normally what ends up happening is they just end up using the standard array setup anyway, with one having a really high stat, one having a really low stat. They'll usually dump stat something like charisma, or freaking wisdom, or intelligence. If you're a fighter-based class, that's what you usually do. You dump stat, 9 times out of 10, you dump stat your charisma, because 9 times out of 10, nobody really looks at charisma as the one thing they want to use, unless you're me. So, that's point buy. Point buy is one of the most simplest to understand. It's actually the most video gamey of all of the stat creations. You literally get a pool of stats. You get 8s across the board, and you have this pool, and you can just spend them out however you want. That's just kind of how it is. Personally, I think it's hard to describe, but I personally don't like it. I don't like point buy, and I don't like standard array. Personally, I love rolling. I love rolling for stats. This is my favorite style of building a character, rolling for stats. There are so many ways to do it, too. You have, off the top of my head, 3d6 in order. 3d6, pick however you want to set it up. 4d6, drop the lowest. 4d6, drop the lowest, reroll 1s. 4d6, drop the lowest, reroll 1s and 2s. Roll 4d6, add the numbers together. There are so many ways to roll for stats. It all depends on your DM. And for me, I like 4d6, drop the lowest, reroll 1s and 2s. And the reason why I like it that way is because I like to throw my characters into the mindset that their numbers don't matter. You know, their stats do not matter. These do not matter. And the reason why I like to build that up is because it's the story, it's the gameplay, it's what we see as players that's important, not the numbers and how big you can get them. Because once your numbers are already pretty big, what then? Makes you start thinking outside of, well, my numbers are pretty big, I'm good. If you start off super, use a quote from a movie, when everybody's super, nobody will be. So, yeah, I love rolling. I've actually done 3d6 in order. Guess what? It was fun. I actually made a freaking sorcerer out of 3d6 in order. And the reason why I did it that way was because I was dared to. I'd been doing a lot of research on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons and was dared to make a character using 3d6 in order. And the reason why I say I was dared to was because I watched a video from about 7 years ago talking about it. His name will not be spoken. I will not share his name. Primarily just because it doesn't matter. I rolled 3d6 in order. I got a sorcerer. And I got a pretty good one out of that. Only problem was my con was like a 4. I rolled 1, 1, and a 2. And I was a Dragonborn. So my con was like a 6. It was great. So it's like, yay! My hit points just went down. That's great. But, yeah. Rolling's pretty good. Rolling's pretty fun. So I won't be talking about this one a lot. This chapter is the adventuring chapter. This is what you can do while you're adventuring. And the reason why I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it is because 9 times out of 10, it all depends on the game you're playing. Adventuring can come down to just traveling, just going from to and from your location that you have your quest for. Traveling or adventuring can also be just picking a spot in an inn to rest. There's a feature called downtime where you can essentially tell your players, okay, you're in downtime, here's how much time you have, and players can do stuff in downtime. They can try to increase their experience to get their levels up. They can try to brew potions. They can create and craft. They can do stuff like that. 9 times out of 10, a lot of players, myself included, just want to get to the next thing. They just want to get to the next story beat. They just want to get to the next fight. And usually a DM will be like, yes, we get to move on, we get to progress. But then there are times where the players just sit down and we're like, we want to go shopping. And the DM's like, that's not progression. That's not moving forward. And it's like, well, we want to go shopping. We're low on supplies and we can't exactly leave the town without some food. So the DM has to come up with an idea of, okay, here's downtime. You've got a couple minutes. And it's like, okay, we're gonna go shop. We're gonna go do stuff. We're gonna just rest or stuff like that. It's all about what you as a player want to do. Personally, as a player, I like to use my downtime to make stuff. Make my guns, make my potions, make just all kinds of things. I love to just sit there and build. But, once we get to another book, there's another aspect of downtime that you can actually do, and I will talk about it when we get there. But for now, adventuring is essentially just playing the game, enjoying your time, figuring out what you want to do. Downtime is an option, something that your DMs will decide whether or not you get, because essentially your downtime you can force downtime, but 9 times out of 10, the DM will also be like, okay, you're going to force some downtime, but your downtime's only going to be like a day. And usually a day's all you need, but unless you're me, where, you need weeks out of it. You need weeks on end, so it's like, okay, now I get to figure it out. Yay! Now we get to move on to my favorite-ish section, or my favorite mechanic. We get to talk about combat. This is the one thing everybody in the world loves about D&D, is the fighting, the combat. Unless you watched EXP to Level 3's videos on Lord of the Rings and you're Frodo, in which case you never figured out how combat works. In which case, more power to you. You can play the whole game and not be a fighter. Combat's pretty simple. Initiative starts when a hostile action is performed on the party or from the party. So if the party decides, okay, we are going to attack, we're going to attack this bandit group, one of two things is going to happen before initiative is called. So, if the party is stealthing, they get what is called a surprise round. The DM goes around the table, and whoever was stealthed and who was preparing their attacks and actions goes through and figures out what they're doing. Then he calls for initiative. Or, he just calls for initiative, and the enemies get the surprise round because they managed to sneak on the party. So that can happen before initiative is called. Sometimes you'll have some players go, I want to try and do something before initiative, and it's like, you kind of should have done that before I called for initiative. Because initiative is the moment that the game world slows, and I mean like, everything is 6 seconds. Everything. From swinging your sword, from drinking a potion, to helping your buddy up. Everything, or a turn of the table, an entire turn rotation, is 6 seconds. So 6 seconds of combat could literally take 10 minutes in real world time. So in game time, you'll be moving through the days so fast that they'll kind of blur together, and then by the time you get to combat, everything just boom slows way down. It's like a ripple effect. It's the best way to explain it to people who have not played D&D. Combat is a 6-second interlude. It's a moment where your party gets into initiative and jumps whoever they're fighting. And it's really funny to think about, because if the party's fighting like one guy, suddenly that one guy getting jumped and getting like 8 different weapons slammed into his body all at once, pretty funny. Because if you think about it, that's the best part. If you watch the Offbeat Outlaw, and he talks about, or in one of his Forever DM skits, he talks about the Infinity Cannon, or the Peasant Cannon, which is essentially where he has this stone being passed down from person to person. And this is kind of breaking the rules a little bit, but only a little bit. Because essentially what ends up happening is from a line of people from the far end all the way down, let's say 100 people. Let's say 100 people managed to pass off a big stone in 6 seconds. 6 seconds, 100 people managed to pass a stone down from one end to the other. From one end to the other, 6 seconds. Imagine how fast that stone's going. Yeah, It's a canon. It's an actual thing. And to be perfectly frank, in terms of the actual mechanics, it's not really something that would happen. But when you think about it logically, no, it makes sense. A stone going 100 yards, 6 seconds. 6 freaking seconds from 100 feet. 100 people. Boom. You essentially turned a rock into a nuke. And that thing does a lot of damage, I'm sure. I haven't tried it. I don't want to try it. I don't want to see how good that would actually be. Because that's not something I need to equate. But that's the general idea. Because actions you have, in combat, you have 3. You have your main action, you have a bonus action, and you have the movement action. Let's go back to the canon idea. It's a main action to pass an item on to another. Okay? It's an action to pass it on or to take it. So you can usually use, it's called use an item, is the action that you use. Main action, use an item, you take the stone, and you pass it on. Bonus actions are abilities or spells that let you essentially do stuff on the side. Take a bard's bardic inspiration, for example. The bard can use an ability called the bardic inspiration, which essentially allows him to give his allies a dice, a d6 to start, and then it gets better. Gives them a dice that they can actually add to their rolls. Makes them better. And the bard can do this as a bonus action. Gives them something to do. Not a lot of classes have bonus actions. Spellcasters have spells, like magic weapon and stuff like that, that can essentially make their weapons or spells better. The rangers get hunter's mark, stuff like that. The bonus action you'll notice when you're playing is the one action that does not get used the most. The bonus action does not get used the most. Now to the movement action. Movement is based off of your character's speed. Now each race has its own speed. An elf has a 35, a gnome has a 25. That means they can move 1 square in combat that each square represents 5 feet. So if you have 25, you can move 4 squares. If you have a 30, you can move 5. Right? No. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. 25 is 5, 30 is 6. It's multiplication, my man. It's pretty easy. You use your speed, you move on the map. If you're playing in a theater of the mind game, 9 times out of 10, your DM will describe to you how far they are from you, and you can go, okay, I'm going to move closer. It's like, okay, how much feet do you have? I have 30 feet. I have 30 feet of movement. And it's like, okay, you can get halfway. Okay, no problem. Bada bing, bada boom, you're ready to go. On the map, you count out how many squares, you move your mini. Done. Movement is pretty easy. Movement is the one action in the entire game that's not really an action. But to simplify it, I call it an action and simply say it's your 3. You get a 3 setup. This is why Action Surge is so good, is because Action Surge gives you another action. So essentially, it turns this into this. You get 2 actions, a bonus action, and a movement. That extra action essentially allows you to do whatever you want with it. So, again, let's look at a fighter wizard. Let's look at a fighter wizard, shall we? The wizard, first turn, casts Fireball as an action. Second action, dashes away and runs off. They can do that, technically. Fighter Rogue. The Rogue bonus actions uses his Cunning action to dash. A Cunning action allows him to dash, disengage, or hide as a bonus action. Again, the bonus action is not very used often, but when it is usually a class-specific ability. So he runs off. He uses his attack to sneak attack a guy. gets the sneak attack off, and then he can use his main action to hide. Just because he has the cunning action doesn't mean he can't use it as a regular action, because you can hide as a regular action. You can hide, you can disengage, you can dash. Dashing doubles your movement speed, but it takes your action to do it. Hiding lets you hide away and potentially get a sneak on your opponent, which means you can potentially, schnack. You get advantage on the next attack roll. We'll be talking about advantage here in a minute. Disengaging essentially means when you're in the throes of combat and you need to separate from your opponent, this is the best time to do it. This is the way to do it because they will not get an attack of opportunity. But you can only disengage from one target, so don't go running into a cloud of monsters and then try to escape, because chances are someone's going to hit you. And then, of course, you have the attack action, which lets you attack, which lets you use a weapon that you are wielding, or fisticuffs, pop, pop. If you're a monk, this is primarily what you're doing. But yeah. Then you have shove, the shove action, which allows you to push a enemy from 5 feet from you. It doesn't initiate a attack of opportunity from you because he's moving out of your space unwillingly, but he does move, and that movement can be important based off of a couple spells. We will talk about those in the spell section of the video, or more accurately, of the playlist, because we are going to do a part 3 where I talk about all the spells. Now, combat's pretty simple. You have those main actions, you have your bonus actions, you have stuff like that. The DM is the one who has to worry the most about the actions and action economy when it comes to his monsters. We'll talk about that when we get to the DMG. When we get to the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Monster Manual, whichever comes first. Probably the DMG. But now we get to talk about advantage and disadvantage. And there's a reason why I saved it till the end. Advantage and disadvantage is one of the most complicated parts of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And the reason why is because it's complicated for the DM. It's complicated for the DM because he's the one who decides whether or not you get advantage or disadvantage. He's the one who decides whether or not you get advantage. It's like, okay, you've been hiding for a couple turns. Yeah, they don't see you. You have advantage. Advantage is where you take 2 d20s and you roll them. You then proceed to take the highest roll out of it. So let's say you rolled a 13 and a 5. You take the 13 and add your modifiers. You ignore the 5. Disadvantage is the exact opposite. Disadvantage is where you take 2 d20s, you roll them, and let's go with the same example, 13 and 5, and you have to take the 5. And like I said, it's the most complicated for the Dungeon Master, because he's the one who has to decide whether or not you have advantage or disadvantage. Normally, if you give players disadvantage, they throw a shit fit. Because it's like, why do you keep giving me disadvantage? It's like, dude, you're trying to attack a guy who's 10 feet above you with a 5-foot range weapon. You're lucky I'm letting you do it in the first place. And you're probably thinking, well, that wasn't a very long section on advantage and disadvantage. You're right. And like I said, it's the most complicated for the Dungeon Master. For players, it's a little bit easier. It's one of those things where it literally tells you in the spell list, oh, this gives you advantage on this. And it's literally like, okay, there's a spell that lets you pick a stat, and you have advantage on skill rolls with it. And it's like, okay, well, make that work. Advantage, disadvantage, stuff like that. That is what the book will tell you, flat out. Let's take the Barbarian's Reckless Attack, for example. Barbarians get an ability called Reckless Attack. Reckless allows them to attack at advantage, but it means that his opponents also get advantage on him, which is not fun, But when you need to make sure that you're hitting every turn, you're doing it. You're gonna, okay, Reckless, I'm doing it. I'm gonna make sure I hit this guy, because I need to hit him. He needs to die, like yesterday. And honestly, the best way to equate it is essentially like, the faster you can kill an enemy, the faster you can stop taking damage from that enemy. You get what I mean? So, if you have that mentality going in, it's not terrible. With that in mind, I'm going to cut this review short, because we need to get into the spell list, and that one's going to take me a minute, and I don't have time this week. So I hope you guys had a fantastic holiday. As always, you know the drill. I'm not going to keep repeating it. I hope you guys had a wonderful time with my second part of the Player's Handbook book review. And as always, I want you guys to remember, keep your human moments natural.